Hello, and warm welcome to everyone tuning in. My name is Tendai Mutambu, and I'm the Assistant Curator of Commissions and Public Programs at Spike Island. It's a real pleasure to introduce today's Behind the Scenes with Rod Harris. This season's Behind the Scenes is an alternative to our regular studio visits at Spike. It's a chance to explore informally artist studios and view works in progress and practices. A bit of housekeeping before we begin. Our public programs seek to create an environment for critical and open-minded discussion. We strongly encourage using the chat function, which you'll see in the YouTube Live, to write any questions you may have throughout the event. I'll do my best to integrate some of these into my and Rod's conversation, but also leave a bit of time at the end so Rod and I can feel these as well, the ones that we don't get through during the conversation. Just a friendly reminder that any aggressive, discriminatory, or intolerant comments will be removed, in keeping with our aims to create a respectful and generative environment for all involved. And just before we begin, I'd love to introduce Rod. Rod Harris works with natural materials and sculpture, education, printmaking, and live art, often collaborating with different disciplines, addressing environmental and social issues. Previously, he undertook a long-term residency with Norwest Children's Centre and was a Level Hume artist in residence at Bristol University. Rod also co-founded the Earth Art Gallery at the university following his residency. His long-term collaboration with artist Valda Jackson and Harris, is currently commissioned by Peabody in London for Espalier, a 17-meter wide relief sculpture of a community tree for the community centre on the Peabody estate in St. John's Hill, currently in production at Spike Island and due for installation in summer 2021. Yeah, thanks so much for joining me, Rod.
Hello, you're welcome. Thank you. Welcome to paradise.
It is paradise, right? A little slice of it.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, I absolutely. Yeah, I'm very, very lucky to have a studio here at Spike, and it's just absolutely fantastic. You can see the how amazing it is. Yeah, I'm very lucky.
So I thought we'd start by talking about this Hawksley brick tree, which is the one that I managed to catch a glimpse of when I came to see you in your studio last. So my first question really was, how did this commission come about, and how did you arrive at this form that you have behind you?
Well, the commission came about. It's part of the Coastal Community Fund, which is a grant that government has given to coastal communities to help them develop. So in Amble, this is a commission from Amble Development Trust, which is in Northumberland. And they have created the Amble Bird Sculpture Trail with the intention of bringing people to Amble, which is about 30 miles north of Newcastle, year round. What I've proposed was, what you can see behind me is the tree stump of a giant oak tree that is 4 meters high. I'm wondering if I just sort of perhaps walk round.
Yeah, you could show
we
us.
could have a little look. So
yeah, it's quite an impressive thing in terms of scale.
So it's made in a local clay. So the area around, so that's the sort of shot of the busyness in the studio, and you can see in the background there the tree, the base of the tree. That's about 2 meters high, and then the top of the tree, which I'm beginning to dismantle, is about halfway down, sits on top of it, and it's made of a local clay that's been made into bricks. It sort of has many layers, actually, this commission, and the intention really, I wanted to, I'm just going to walk around and then we can talk about it, because I wanted to show you, so it's got holes in it that go all the way through, so hopefully you can see, you can see here, this is that's a sort of you know, where branches get cut off, trees don't heal, they grow around the bit that's been sliced off. So this was a branch that's been sliced off, and then a bird.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that a bird will live in it, and it's. I've been working with the. So this is a sense of the tree.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 4 tons of clay in total.
Wow.
And there's another section there which shows a hole. And I've been working with the RSPB to identify what sort of bird would be suitable. And the tree sparrow is an endangered species, and yet it is around that area. So it's the site of this sculpture will be in Lower Hawksley. I'll just show you the maquette for it. So it's going to be like that.
Nice. And just for those who don't know, that the RSPB is, what is it? The Royal
Society for the Protection of Birds.
Birds, right?
Yeah. And so they, I mean, what they said was that it's a good idea to make the birds, the nest holes have to be a certain diameter so that it prevents bigger birds getting in. And so it's designed specifically for a colony of tree sparrows. And interestingly, tree sparrows like to nest in groups. So there will be about 8 different.
I think we're back online now. Sorry, we had a little technical glitch there. Roger, I think you were talking about some of the about the bird life that you envisage kind of being part of this once it's installed.
Yeah, so the holes are designed for a specific size to enable a specific size of bird to enter. So it's specifically designed for tree sparrows, and there's also I've also created sort of insect larders within the tree, so that they don't, so that food can live with them.
Yeah, and I guess that's sort of part of your ethos, right? Like your interest in the work you make. It's not only that you mentioned to me before that the material is locally sourced as well, right? So an interest in the environment, but also how that work might have a life after you've set it in place. How do you envisage it sort of like aging or kind of sitting there in a way?
Well, I suppose it has 2 functions. It has a kind of an economic function within the sculpture trail, but it also has an environmental function in that it will hopefully provide habitat. And it also, I'm interested in the idea of making trees grow out of wood. You don't really make trees out of brick. And so I like that tension. That, and I think that that really is one of the themes throughout my work. The sort of tension between the material and the image,
Yeah.
and the kind of implications of that. I quite like. It seems quite absurd, really, to make a tree out of bricks.
Yeah.
And that's probably why I want to do it.
Yeah, we're going to touch on that actually. I think it's a kind of the thing that drew me to the work, including some of your collaborations with Felder as well, is that material tension, the kind of surrealism of it in a way. But I wanted to touch on the question that you probably get asked quite a lot, but it's still probably fairly interesting for many, is what the process entails for you in terms of putting this kind of thing together, from say like the drawing stage to the maquettes to constructing and then taking it apart before you install. Loosely speaking, what does that look like?
So what I've learnt in a process like this is that you have to push yourself to the limit to try to find an image or a concept that works. And then once you feel comfortable with something, you have to push it again and again and again until the umpteenth time, and really work on it. And you find, you work on it day and night. And so with this, I was fortunate in that I've been able to get sponsorship from Ibstock Building Products, who are trying to raise their environmental awareness within their products, but also within the work that they do. So it's a long process. I mean, usually it involves a community. A project like this is essentially determined by its context. And in order to make something like this interesting for me, it has to fit in with what I want to do. So it's a kind of a marriage of the context with your own sort of interests, so that you have an emotional link with the work. I mean, when I unwrapped it this morning, there's a huge tree has got quite a warmth to it. But so the process is that I would then, make a maquette, do drawings that would then be placed in the environment to give the client a sense of place. If it's going onto a building, there would, you Photoshop it on, make it appear like it's actually there.
Yeah, I think Liv just showed an image actually just previously of the work photoshopped in for scale as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, I think, one of the things about this period of the pandemic is that it's meant that I haven't been able to visit the site. And that's had benefits and disadvantages. I mean, obviously, if you're going to make a piece of work for somewhere, you need to go there. But I haven't been able to do that. And it's personal reasons as well as pandemic reasons. And so, but one of the reasons why I wanted to do the commission was because of the fantastic location. So it's, there's ways around it. One aspect of this period is the fact that you have had to develop more self-reliance, which I don't mind. I quite like. I haven't disliked that aspect to it, to have to depend on yourself and find ways of doing things which you might have looked to others to help you in the past.
Yeah, and I guess that nimbleness has been part of what this year has sort of demanded, I suppose. But you mentioned also, you mentioned the things that this year has made difficult, but I'm curious about the things that it's also enabled. Like, do you feel like maybe you have had greater stretches of time to focus, or have there been things that you've sort of found productive out of this period?
Yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed having the chance just to do this and nothing else. You know, this is all I do, and I mean, I absolutely love doing it. But I mean, I do like doing other things, of course, and it's 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 a sanctuary actually to come here, and I'm very lucky to be in a space that is relatively safe. You know, I've got the window open. There's nobody else here. I mean, obviously, when I'm working with Valda and we're working on this giant project at the moment, which unfortunately we can't go and see for many reasons, but we're right in the middle of a huge project. Um, um, I think you know it. I mean, I've got this brick. I brought this brick out which has anxiety on it. You know, because there's a kind of a constant level of anxiety, I think, at the moment. And I don't know. I think I had a very serious problem towards the beginning of the year, and I just feel so grateful to be alive, to be honest. And so to come here and, you know, it's just a joy.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Yeah. I also thought we could talk about this collaboration that you have with Valda as part of Jackson and Harris. So Valda Jackson, who's a sculptor, painter, printmaker, writer, also a studio holder at Spike Island. And I'm curious to know how long you've worked together and how the collaboration came about.
Well, I met Valda when we were both at Bar Ashton back in the late 1980s. And I mean, to be honest with you, she was more help than anyone else at college. And since then, we've worked together. And, you know, more formally within the last quite a few years, we've sort of formalized the collaboration. I mean, her work is world class. You know, her drawing and artwork is of such a high quality that it's had such a profound impact on my work. And you can really see, you know, we work in collaboration and we work individually, and inevitably the quality of her eye is going to come through in other pieces that I do. And so, you know, so we've really worked in collaboration for 30 years.
Wow.
You know, which is amazing. And, you know, thinking about it, it's one of those things that if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
So, you know, inevitably any collaboration has its challenges, but the you know the work that we're making at the moment, you know, I think one thing about I mean, we're making this giant commission for this. It's a 12-story tower block in Clapham, and we're carving a relief on the side of it of a tree, funnily enough. But in its branches, it contains imagery from the area, you know, so there's violins and teapots and dolls and cups and saucers and headphones and everything. And in a way, again, it has that sort of surreal quality to it. But I think part of our job is to take risks, you know, because if you could buy it off the shelf, you wouldn't commission an artist, obviously.
Of course.
And so I think, you know, together we will do it. It's an absolute pleasure and it's a privilege, to be honest, to be able to work with someone of such high quality, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it comes through in the work. I guess you can track a progression. I'm going to post towards the end of this talk your website and Valda's, and then the Jackson and Harris one as well. Just to track the kind of refinement. Like if you say if it's not broke, don't fix it. But there is a sense of a kind of a commitment to fine tuning and refining, and a real sensitivity to draftspersonship and material, the making as well. which I really like. But just for those who aren't familiar with the details, the work that Rod was just referring to is a espalier, which is, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like it's a fruit tree or an ornamental shrub whose branches are trained to grow flat against a wall, usually supported by like a lattice or something. And so it's in relief, and then it's got all these objects that you're referring to within it as well. And I like what I gravitated towards when I was looking at the drawings that you showed me, was this way of defying the kind of harshness of the kind of modernist architectural idiom, whatever, and how your work is sort of breathing life into these things, by often including, like, domestic objects. Previously, you've done stuff like, wash basins or washing machines or garments on a clothesline in relief against a building. And I'm curious to know about your interest in picking those particular objects. For example, like your 4-brick reliefs commission, the objects that you chose for that.
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, context is everything, and in a way, public art is of the public. And though the 4-brick reliefs refer to the historical context of the place. So, for example, there are 2 pinafores hanging on the wall, and in the so this estate is being redeveloped, and it was originally built in the 1930s, and the houses, the flats, are no longer fit for purpose. So they've basically wiped the slate clean and built brand new buildings. And so there is nothing there to remind people of the context in which they are, in a sense, and the history. And so certainly 4-brick reliefs, the historical context played quite an important role. Because talking about the pinafores, young women would wear pinafores on a daily basis to keep themselves clean, and the uniform refers to the porters' uniforms. It also refers to the occupants. The chair of the local community, Pat Champion, her dad was a porter in one of the blocks. The tools refer to self-help. There was a culture of self-help. If you joined Peabody, if you got a flat there, it wasn't really you had to be working, you had to pay the rent, but there was a kind of a social contract. So you had to look after yourself. You had to be in at certain hours. The sink refers to those communal washrooms. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, I think. Yeah, I guess harking back to that history of those places, of those buildings, and kind of communal ways of doing things. I just have a question from someone in the audience, from Rosa Tyhurst in the YouTube live chat. And she wants to know, how do you and Valda determine what you work on collaboratively and individually?
Well, I suppose the reliefs really are what we do collaboratively. And we have our own practices as well. So I suppose the project determines whether we collaborate on it or not.
Yeah. And thinking about that surreal collision that we were talking about between, the materials and how you sort of want to play with that a bit. I'm thinking of the material being rendered in a hard material, whereas you have an object being rendered in a hard material, like a seat or a couch that you expect to be sort of plush and soft upholstery and so on. Or there's the toaster. I don't know if we can get an image of that at some point, the toaster. Which is a real fun kind of thing to think about. There's something really playful in the element, but tongue-in-cheek, and maybe even a little bit sinister in a way. So I'm curious as to how you came to this way of working.
Well, I mean, I love that tension in a piece of work, and I'm really glad that you've noticed that surreal aspect, because I've been thinking about that quite a lot, and I think, especially in the context of the work that we did called Curtain,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, which opened earlier this year, and the way that surrealism sort of um, talks about how surrealist thinking sort of provides a resource to examine the role that architecture plays in forming reality, and the way that your place determines kind of how you are, maybe not who you are, but kind of it has quite an influence, quite an influence on you, and I love that notion of something being, I mean, like a toaster that's made of bricks, you can't make toast in it,
Mm-mm.
but yet it kind of, the bricks have been heated. There's there's things
There's the
going on.
firing and there's yeah.
And I just, like I said with the tree, if it's something that doesn't seem right, then it seems like it's worthwhile doing
Mm-hmm.
for some sort of reason. And I think it's something to do with, there's the note that surrealism in architecture, is not common, but it's there in big, grandiose projects across the world. And it's about the real, the more than real, and the unreal, and the kind of fake. And it's, the way that it's interesting, really, this kind of notion of a zeitgeist, and how you work within, you feel that you're kind of working alone, and yet you're actually part of something greater, that it's hard sometimes to define. And surrealism has always interested me, and I've got a Salvador Dali. We went to Salvador Dali's house in northern Spain, and I've got one of those little, little Mae West sofa, the lip sofa, Yeah. So I love that element to it. I love that element of tension, and I think it was Jordan Peterson said that we all have good and evil in us, in our hearts, and it's our choice to determine which way we go.
We've got another question from Tom Ketteringham, actually. He says, "Hello, Rodney. Earlier you mentioned the link between absurdity and material. Is that something that is often a consideration in your work?" I guess you've kind of touched upon that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I just, I think that it's really, in a way, it's fun making things that, I mean, it's sort of almost total luxury. I mean, bricks are hard because they've got to be practical, and buildings, I mean, I suppose it's that idea that things don't have to be as they are. We can choose how we make the world. We don't have to go along with how it is, and I mean, there's a practical element. We all want to live in houses which are functional, but we don't have to. We've got potential for change, I suppose, is kind of the more interesting aspect to it.
Yeah, I think we talked about this when we met in your studio the first time. Yeah, this potential for things to be otherwise, and how in many ways artists and artistic thinking can bring that into our lives, just to imagine that things could be another way. And I really, really like that. And thinking about kind of that imaginative aspect as well, we have a question from Jane Farram, and she's asked, "Are there any materials or environments you haven't explored in your work that you'd like to in the future?" And I guess that's a big one.
Yeah, I'd like to go to the Death Valley, and do some work there. What I've realised, and following the residency I did at Bristol University in geology and earth sciences, there's there's a link between earth sciences and artists, and I think that's probably another reason why the residency then flourished into the need or the desire to create a gallery. But you know, I suppose geologists and artists share this passion for the world. We kind of artists look at it through human emotional eyes, and earth scientists kind of tell you what it is or what it's doing or where it's going or what it was like, and it's just truly unbelievable, really, the geological notions of time. And I'd really love to do some work there, and I'd also like to do some work in a forest. You know, once you start studying trees, they are truly unbelievable things. And I mean, for those of you who aren't in Bristol, there's Spike Island Studios is near Ashton Court, and there's an oak tree in Ashton Court, it's just enormous. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It is enormous. I don't know how old it is. It's probably 400 years old, 500 years old. You know, they don't go anywhere. they don't go anywhere, trees. And yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds extraordinary. Death Valley would be quite something. Jane's just said it's the hottest place on earth. And I mean, for those who don't know, Death Valley is like a desert valley in Eastern California in the desert, which would be, it'd be quite something.
Well, the landscape is truly spectacular, isn't it? The way that it has these sort of, I don't know what they're called, stacks in amongst the sort of lower desert. And I suppose it reveals time, you know, a bit like the way that the Jurassic coast on the south coast of England, you can walk along the coast and you can see 300 million years of history. And I mean, there aren't many places you can walk and see 300 million years in front of you.
Yeah. Which is a perfect segue actually into the next question I wanted to ask you. When you were doing your Leverhulme Trust artist residency, you made a print. I think it's a 15-part print based on a strata map by the English geologist William Smith in 1815. And it's now held in the permanent collection of the Bristol University. I'm kind of curious about why you wanted to work with that map and why you wanted to rework it in a way.
So so that began in 2015, which was the 200th, the bicentenary of the first publication of William Smith's map. And he's known as the father of modern geology because he discovered the order of strata. So when he was a surveyor, and his job was to survey the Somerset Coal Canal to get coal out of Somerset to the cities. So this is sort of pre-industrial revolution. And he found that as he was going down mines, he noticed that certain strata always sat above other strata. And so he came to the conclusion that there was an order to this. And he then went around the country and could go to somebody's vast estate and tell them whether their land contained glory. So essentially, it was an economic. It was a bit like discovery of the genome, or the invention of the computer, or you know, in its day, it had a huge economic impact. And if you look at his original map, one of which is in Bristol University, it's got details of, you know, where coal mines were or where different seams of things are. And so for the 200th centenary, I thought I'd rework that map, but do it in a way that wasn't about the economics, but about the landscape. You know, it's about the color of rocks are truly amazing. You know, most rocks, they sort of homogenize on the surface just because of dirt and dust and so on, and plant life. But when you reveal the true color of it, it's truly stunning. And So the notion of creating a map which wasn't about the economy, but it was about the environment and taking care of that landscape and making something, you know, that word beauty, something about beauty, and you know, just to discover those colours and so interestingly, at the university in the Earth Sciences Common Room, they had the original William Smith map on the wall in a frame. And I was able to, so they took the original map out, had it reframed, and because it's worth a lot of money, but they kept the frame. So I thought, well, I'm going to use the same frame, and I'm going to use the same scale and the same format. And so I've just basically replaced his map with one which just shows the colours of the landscape. And also, his was very southern England centric. And I wanted to talk about how, you know, I wanted to, it's a delineation of strata of England, Wales, Scotland, and parts of Ireland and France, which are all equal nations, you know, in amongst this area. So I wanted to cover all of them. So I've actually twisted the map a little bit to include, you know, French chalk. There's some beautiful colours of Irish slate, you know, to try to sort of balance it out.
Yeah. So Smith's map is the original map. It's quite sort of colorful, I suppose, brightly hued. And then yours is a bit more subdued, right? But there are subtleties and these tones that are still quite varied.
Well, I suppose that you know, so for example, Smith used green for chalk, and chalk is not green.
Yeah.
So it just seemed to me that it wasn't quite right. And I mean, I'm not. I don't intend that as a criticism. I just wanted to make it as it actually is.
I mean, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And the result is really quite beautiful. But the process as well is sort of interesting, isn't it? Because what you're doing is you're taking pigments from actual rock collected from the areas depicted in the original map. And then you're grounding this, you're making it into a pigment, mixing it with linseed oil, and turning it into a printable ink.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about how long it takes, or how long it took you to create that, or to gather this material and then create it.
Well, it takes quite a long time. I mean, it took the residency was about a year. It went on a little bit longer. I mean, interestingly enough, when you look at the geology of Britain, the area around Bristol is actually very, very varied, and it contains a lot of the minerals and rocks that are present in other parts of the country. So you don't have to necessarily travel everywhere. I mean, for example, I managed to get people to send me samples of their rock from different quarries in different places. You know, before in 2009, I did a residency at Liverpool University, and that's really where I first started using the technique of printing with rocks. So I was kind of armed when I started the residency. But also, you know, the university has such a rich collection of materials. You know, much like a museum, there's more in the basement than there is on show. And so they were able to provide me with some examples, you know, piece of Portland stone, or you know, once the word got out, people would go places. I mean, someone brought me some Namibian seabed, you know, which I ended up using. Another brought me some lapis lazuli, you know. So although that wasn't used in the map, it kind of, you know, color is an amazing thing, and we all have a kind of a link with place. You know, it's very, very interesting how you know, I was once in Istanbul, sat in a restaurant, and there was a red brick wall next to me. And I just thought, that's familiar, you know, that's how odd. And I spoke to the owner of the restaurant, and he said, oh yeah, it's come from Leeds. And whether we like it or not, we are of our place, you know, and it's interesting to know what that is. You know?
Yeah. And I guess you're in search of that in a way, but also in search of it in a way that is beyond purely kind of descriptive, or not to denigrate it necessarily, but to be critical of the sort of purely scientific. And I think there's a poetry to the way how you've recast those maps, using that very material in that way to have that resonance between what the diagram is referring to, what the image is referring to, and the actual, you know, the geological matter and the material. And there's this lovely line from Alan Wilkinson in a piece titled "A Delineation of the Strata," which is responding to that series, that work, in which he describes you walking, searching, collecting, drying, smashing, grinding, sieving, mixing, rolling, printing, physical actions that result in discovering the colors that appear on the paper. And I love how she captures the physicality in a way of, you know, what your work entails. And we talked about your interest in sport and your interest in movement and physicality and stuff. And I'm curious about what that's like for you, that the way of working and how that nourishes that interest of yours to be, I guess, yeah, to work physically, I suppose.
Well, I mean, I suppose, I mean, I love it, you know. I mean, I was lucky or unlucky enough to work, to be brought up on a farm where I spent most of my weekends shoveling. You know, as the youngest son, I was the one who had to do a lot of shoveling of you know what. And, but you know, I don't mind that. And I was thinking about this earlier, you know, because I play a lot of tennis, you know, and then there's a kind of the way that the word sculpture now can be interpreted in its widest sense. You know, there's elements of sculpture in tennis, in movement, in hitting, in, you know, in velocity, you know. And I mean, Henry Moore used to shut his studio for 2 weeks when Wimbledon was on. I mean, whether you like Henry Moore or not, I just like, you know, I wouldn't have mind sat watching Wimbledon with him. Yeah, so you know, I mean, when I was doing the residency, we went to William Smith's. He lived near Bath, and there is this huge near where he lived. There's this huge landslide of, I think it's called Fuller's Earth, which used to be a product. It's like this sort of green powdery stuff, but it's sort of clay-like. And I remember we were walking along, and one of the professors who we were with said, that's Fuller's Earth. You know, when you look at it, it's like this huge sort of landslide. And I was just able to sort of dig into the ground and just collect lumps of it and bring it back. And so to have, I mean, I like doing that anyway, but to have a good reason to go somewhere, you know, like we go on holiday to Devon or something, and you'd be on the beach and you'd be sort of digging into the rocks and collecting bits of mud, and yeah, it's yeah, I love that.
That's brilliant. You mentioned just being from a farming family, from Somerset, I think you said, and I'm curious about how this. You say it's had a profound, or it's created a profound bond with the landscape. And I'm curious to know or is this a bond you've always had, and has it changed in character over the years? Because in a sense there is a slight tension between the kind of farming relationship to the land and maybe something that I sense in your work that you're trying to cultivate, having sort of grown up in a farming town in New Zealand, and my own relationship to the environment after the fact. After that, it's kind of something that's evolved over time, in the sense that I've grown to be more critical of that initial relationship of, you know, of thinking of the land as a resource in that way, or kind of something, an object of commerce, or something that has someone's name attached to it. For example, if we talk about a particular area in a place, or so-and-so's earth and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's a kind of a dichotomy within farming. On the one hand, it's abusive to the environment, and on the other hand, it's it's nurturing to the environment, you know. And I mean, my father was a dairy farmer, and you know, I made a brick once which is called "Grow Grass on a Stone,"
Mm.
you know, because he could. And there's a lovely poem about it which talks about how he worked with the elements, not against it. And so there's something about a farmer who has a closeness to the elements, but at the same time uses them for either personal gain or for food, or you know. And I mean, my father was a dairy farmer, and you know, dairy food and meat, you know, is not great for the environment, you know. So to think that his whole life, you know, I mean, I went vegetarian a few years ago, and yet I find it hard to give up milk because, you know, my dad was, that's all he did. So, you know, this thing about your relationship with the environment, it's a kind of nature nurture thing, isn't it? It's that sort of that knife edge between the two. And I think maybe it's as I've got a bit older, I've sort of become more aware of my closeness to the land. But also, I mean, you know, climate change is the elephant in the room, isn't it? We've got to do everything we can. In my opinion, it is the number one problem, you know, and there's nothing else. I don't know why we even drive, or, you know, it just, we, you know, I mean, what can I do? I can, all you can do is what you do yourself. You know, I don't want to preach. But what I want to do is I want to make trees, and I want to make houses for birds. And, you know, I think there's a Buddhist saying, isn't there, that says, tread lightly, you know? And so, you know, it's very interesting, you know, that the notion, I read a comment this morning, a phrase about truth and God, and how God is within you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, God is not something you need to search for. And I'm not a religious fanatic. I see the earth as God in a way. And so, you know, there's a kind of I'm starting to ramble now.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's in my mind, it's all coalescing actually. But I think you've given us much to think about in a way. And your work does too, right? I think there's a way in which you model these principles in the very residencies you do, and the education related stuff that you do, the actual making of the work and the material that you use. But you mentioned in passing really quickly before we take maybe a few more questions from the audience. You mentioned the bird's nest, which I can see just behind you, which are lovely little objects that I wondered if you could speak to for a moment.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll get one. So the idea really is that, so when I started this tree commission, I had this idea that these would sit inside the tree. And then as I was making them, I thought, yeah, but they're too nice to go inside a tree. And it's just a hole, you know. As long as it's functioning as suitable habitat for the bird. So I sort of explored this, and I was fortunate with my daughter who came with me, and we both worked on making bird boxes during lockdown 1. And it's bird architecture. So it's you know, birds, it's form follows function. You know, they you know, swifts, I think it's swifts, they make their nests from their saliva. You know, that's what you get bird's nest soup from. So you boil up bird's nests and you pay thousands of pounds to eat it. Yeah, so this is almost like merchandise that goes with the tree. So this will be hopefully around the town of Amble. Yeah, it's a nice thing to do, to try to, you know, we need more birds, especially in cities. So we should put more of these up everywhere, not just, you know, not these, but any type.
Yeah, of course. How many of those are you making? Or have you made?
I don't know. As many as I can.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that I can sort of commercialize them with the brick company. You know, with a bit of luck, we might be able to get some sort of mass production. You know, they make bat boxes for buildings.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so if you buy a new house, you can have one with a bat box.
I'd love one of the bird's nests. So let me know when they're on sale.
Okay.
We have a question actually that was posted earlier from Global X9, which says, how do you fire such large pieces? I guess this was in reference to
the tree.
The Hawksley tree, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all the work, they are industrially produced. So these bricks will go back to. So this is a brick that's been dismantled. That's part of the tree. Look, you can see the bark. I mean, that will go back to a brick factory to be fired. So I don't fire them. The brick factory fires them. So that, and also then it means that they meet the sort of construction standard for durability, all those things. Especially if it's a relief, you know, it has to function as a water screen. But something like this, they will be taken back to the brickwork. So with this, I'm very lucky and grateful to Ibstock that they're sponsoring it. So they will supply the material and then they'll fire it.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I had another question actually related to, or unrelated to the stuff we've discussed. This was about your earlier work with performance. I know you did some performances at Arnold Feeney. I think it was 2007 and 2010. So I'm curious to hear a bit more about that aspect of your practice. And yeah, what were you looking at the time?
Well, I mean, I love live art. I love the edge. I love the sort of the immediate sort of aspect of, and there's no rules. You know, you don't know. I mean, there are no rules really when you go into a white cube art gallery, but when you go into a theatre for a piece of live art, you really don't know what you're going to expect. And I suppose I always had this desire to paint myself in clay. You know, I mean, why not? And so again, that was a collaboration with an artist, Winnie Love, who. So we did a piece called After It's Been Discovered That the Only Deity Is the Earth, which kind of says it all really about the rest of the work as well. You know, you know, once we realise that it's the earth that we need to protect and not necessarily, you know, we need to worship the earth, and so that was a way of. You know, in a way, there's a theatre in making art for the public or making any sort of artwork. There's a kind of a presentation in a theatre. So there's a kind of all the work, the live art or the printmaking or the sculpture, it all kind of fits in the same area for me. And we did another piece, which was, I think there's a photo called Bath.
Yeah, just show that.
Which is that photo is called Bath, but the work was called Shock and Awe, and it was in response to the American invasion, you know, and the madness really of it all. So I'm there wallowing in clay, and I make a dunce's. I've made myself a dunce's hat. I've come on stage as an American Marine. I'm dressed as an American Marine, you know, and back then I might have got away with it. And you know, I take everything off and I wallow in this bath of red. You know, I really like that. I like the instant. I like the instantness of it, I suppose.
Yeah. Is it something you'll ever go back to, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a show in 2023. There's a sort of a retrospective clay performance. You know, there's quite a sort of a genre, if you like, of people who work with clay in performance art, you know,
Okay.
across the world. So there's a kind of a retrospective, and I think they want me to bathe again.
Mm.
So, so I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll keep us posted for the Redux. Thanks so much, Rod. I think we're getting close to time. So just want to say thanks for taking the time to be in conversation and showing us the work.
No, thank you, Tendai. It's been an absolute pleasure. And if anybody wants to get in touch, you know, they can any way they like, you know, through the website or whatever. Thank you, Tendai.
Exactly. I'm just posting some links now, actually, that people can access. These will be in the YouTube chat. I also wanted to thank my colleague Olivia Jones for her support in making all the tech run. And for those of you who'd like to follow Rod's practice as well as his collaborative work with Valdo Jackson, I've just shared the links in the YouTube chat. You can see those. I'm also going to include links to our website for you to see some of the brilliant work we have showing, including a newly commissioned film and WhatsApp voice memo exchange by artist and dancer Zinzi Minot. We also have on our website video documentation of Denzel Forrester's solo exhibition, Itching and Scratching, to tide you over until such time as you can actually see it in person. Lastly, we have a drawing workshop with artist and designer Kai Burton this weekend on Saturday from 1 to 2 p.m. This will be virtual, a Zoom-led workshop looking at observing one's surroundings and using simple materials to play with texture and color. As always, we welcome your donations. I'm also going to post a link to how you can support us in the chat. And thanks so much for joining us. We hope to see you next time. Thanks, Rod.
Thank you, Tendai.
Cheers.